Hello brothers and sisters, and welcome back to an all-new Sermons in the Park. As always, I am your Reverend Jamie McCaskill. Once again, I want to take this time, like I do each and every week, to thank you for joining me here. It's always a pleasure to have you here with me whenever you watch it, whether it be tomorrow or today, which is the 22nd of May, or whenever you watch it. It's always so great. Leave a comment. In fact, let's start leaving a comment down below of the date that you watch it. That way I know when you watched it. Get some interaction going here between us. Before we get started, I want to mention I have something new that I've started doing. I started ordering tracts, which is nothing new. I've already been getting in the Gospels of John, and if that's something that you would like, a little pocket Gospel of John, I have those with me. If you're a follower of the ministry and you would like to be able to participate in the ministry more, and it's something that you'd be interested in doing, get with me. Let me give you some of those. You can pass them out. Jeannie, who started watching me not that long ago, she passes out the Gospels of John that I have, as well as some of the other little tracts that I get. Some of the ones that I've got right now that I'd be interested to see how many of you find them. It's something new that I've started doing. It's these little things right here. They look like a little like a $5 bill that's been folded up. So if you're in Fostoria and you are walking through Kroger or any store, and you see, what I will do is I'll take one of these and I fold it in half. I'll show you what I do with it. I take it and I fold it in half, like so, and I fold it again. And when you're walking through Kroger or Circle K or wherever, and you'll see it laying there, it'll look like a $5 bill that's been rolled up. That's me or a member of my ministry, such as maybe Jeannie or Sheena, someone else who possibly has been passing them out. But what it is, it's a little $5 bill, and on the inside it has it just tells you that some things are better than money. I do not encourage anyone to leave these as a tip. It's rude. It should not be done. I just like to walk through the store, let it pretend like it falls out of my pocket. And then somebody picks it up later and they discover that it's a tract. I'll tell you a couple. The other day, when I first got them, I walked through Kroger here in Fostoria, dropped one in the aisleway, did my shopping, came back, and there are people at the end of the aisle, a whole group of people in a circle, and they had found it. One of them had picked it up and they were reading it together. Thought that was awesome. Today, I was walking through, once again I went through Kroger, and on my way out I dropped it on the floor right in the breezeway, then went back into the store, pretended like I had left something, come back out, and it was already gone. I'm talking, boom, it was gone. Which is a good thing and yet a sad thing too, because it was so fast, whoever picked that up had to have seen me drop it. But at the same time, I'm happy because they picked up this tract and read it. I dropped some off. I went to Walmart and Tiffin because I was over there visiting Jennifer, and I dropped a few of them off in that Walmart over there. But anyway, so without any further, but if that's something that you're interested in, if you would like to get some of these, if you're a member of you follow the ministry, and you would like some of these tracts that I do. I've ordered some that have that are called the test. I've got some $1 million bills that I like to hand up to people. Hey, have you got your million yet? And I hand it to them. So yeah, if there's something that you'd be interested in, get a hold of me. I'll be glad to give you some of the tracts that I have, the Gospels of John, these $5 bills, and I might get into some more denominations later. But right now I got the 5. I got the $1 million bills, and then of course, like I said, I have the test coming. If that's something that you're interested in, please get a hold of me. We'll meet up, and I'll give you some. But without any further ado, let's get on into the video today. Let's bow our heads and thank our Heavenly Father like we do each and every week right here on Sermons in the Park. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for all those who are watching. I want to thank you for all those who are watching now, and the ones who may be watching this video later. I thank you, Lord, for the food that you give us, the air that we breathe, the waters that we drink, all these great and wonderful gifts that you give us. You give us such things, Lord, that we don't even notice, something on such molecular levels that there's no way we could even ever notice, that you give us healing, you give us blessings, you give us so very much, animals that are out there for us to be, things that are just, it's like a painting that you made, Lord, and we can see all these great and wonderful things, and we miss them. We miss them, Father, because a lot of times our heads are bowed looking at these little tiny screens in our hand. So when we do that, we're missing the great and amazing things that are around us. A little seed, Father, that might have fallen on the ground and been covered by a boulder that then later splits that boulder when it erupts into a magnificent tree that you put there, God. It's great and it's beautiful things. And we thank you now. We thank you for your Son, Jesus, who came so we can have this relationship that we have with you. It's amazing, Father, and we thank you so very, very much. And we thank you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So for those of you who are new, what we do here is we go through the Bible. We do it book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And yes, sometimes we break it down word by word, don't we? And right now we're in Judges chapter 17. So if you aren't caught up with us and you would like to be caught up before you continue to listen, stop the video here, go back and find Judges and just start reading, start reading and listening, get caught up with us. And then when you come back, we'll be right here. So I'm sorry, I meant chapter 18. I don't know why I said chapter 17. Anyway, and here in chapter 18, we're going to be reading about the Danites. If you remember in chapter 1, we read about how they had failed to conquer their territory because they had been lazy and cowardly, right? They were still looking to settle in the same place, all right? Unlike the previous 2 spy missions that they had, and if you want to read about those are in chapter Numbers, chapter 13 and 14. You can also read about it in Joshua, chapter 2. The mission that we're going to read about here, though, is not under the authority of God. So let us go ahead and read Judges chapter 18, not 17, like I said, and I'm sorry about that. We're going to read the entire chapter, Judges chapter 18, verses 1 to 31. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day all their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. And the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their coasts, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land, and to search it. And they said unto them, Go search the land. Who, when they came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they knew the voice of the young man, the Levite. And they turned in hither, and said unto him, Who brought thee hither? And what makest thou in this place? And what hast thou here? And he said unto them, Thus and thus dealeth Micah with me, and hath hired me, and I am his priest. And they said unto him, Ask counsel, we pray thee, of God, that we may know whether our way which we go shall be prosperous. And the priest said unto them, Go in peace, before the Lord is your way wherein ye go. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, 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 and saw the people that were therein, how they dwelt careless, after the manner of the Zidonians, quiet and secure, and there was no magistrate in the land that might put them to shame in anything. And they were far from the Zidonians, and had no business with any man. And they came unto their brethren to Zorah and Eshtaol, And their brethren said unto them, What say ye? And they said, Arise, that we may go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And are ye still? Be not slothful to go, and to enter to possess the land. When ye go, ye shall come unto a people secure, and to a large land, for God hath given it into your hand, a place where there is no want or anything that is in the earth. And they went from thence of the families of the Danites, out of Zorah, and out of Ishtaol, 600 men appointed with weapons of war. And they went up and pitched in Kirjath Jearim, sorry if I butchered that, in Judah. Wherefore they called the place Mahanadan unto this day. Behold, it is behind Kirjath Jearim. And they passed thence into Mount Ephraim, and came into the house of Micah. Then answered the 5 men that went to spy out the country of Laish, and said unto their brethren, Do ye know that there is these houses an ephod, and teraphim, and a graven image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what ye have to do. And they turned thitherward, and came to the house of the young man the Levite, even unto the house of Micah, and saluted him. And the 600 men appointed with their weapons of war, which were of the children of Dan, stood by the entering of the gate. And the 5 men that went to spy out of the land went up, and came to thither, and took the graven images, and the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. And the priests stood in the entering of the gate, with the 600 men that were appointed with weapons of war. And these went into Micah's house, and fetched the carved image, the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. Then said the priest unto them, What do ye? And they said unto him, Hold thy peace, lie thine hand upon thy mouth, and go with us, and be to us a father and a priest. It is better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man, or that thou be a priest unto the tribe and a family in Israel. And the priest's heart was glad. And he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image, and went in the midst of the people. So they turned and departed, and put the little ones and the cattle and the carriage before them. And when they were a good ways away from the house of Micah, the men that were in the houses near Micah's house were gathered together, and overtook the children of Dan. And they cried unto the children of Dan, and they turned their faces, and said unto Micah, What aileth thee, that thou comest with such a company? And he said, Ye have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and ye are gone away. And what have I more? And what is this that ye say unto me? What aileth thee? And the children of Dan said unto him, Let not thy voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows run upon thee, and thou lose thy life, and the lives of thy household. And the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back into his house. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priest which he had, and came unto Laish, unto the people that were at quiet and secure, and they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon, and they had no business with any man. And it was in the valley that lieth by Beth Rahab, and they built a city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at the first. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Now, like I said again, and I'll say it again and again and again, if you're new here, what we do is we read the entire chapter, right? Then we go back and we start with chapter 1, and we work our way down. Okay? Now, let's reread verse 1. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in, for until the day of their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. So, because the Danites had been restricted by the Amorites, they looked for an area, right, that would give them territory for their people to live. This is because of what we saw in chapter 1. They had been unable to gain possession of their allotment, and their sin was compounded on by them, inaugurating their settlement in the territory in the north by instituting Micah's apostle, if you will, his apostate religion. Now remember, their inheritance was north. The bulk of them already had their inheritance, but of course, some of the people were still trying to settle, okay? These specific Danites here are the ones as we read, Zorah and Eshtaol, right? Okay, so let's continue on. Let's look at verse 2 now. And the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their coasts, men of valor, right? From Zorah and Eshtaol to spy on the land and to search it. And they said unto them, Go search the land. Who, when they came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. According to Abernel, all right, it was one out of all of the families. Just like how Moses sent out, one of each tribe to spy on the land. So if we go by that, we're seeing that there must have been only 5 families involved in this particular event. The verse says, from their coasts, men of valor, from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy on the land and to search it. They were sent from the borders of the tribes' lands. That's what we're reading here. And they were sent into these, extreme parts. Which makes me think, maybe they were all living there and they were overcrowded. We see a mention of 2 places here, Zorah and Eshtaol, which I mentioned earlier. That makes sense, as they are the first cities in that particular allotment, all right? As well as the coasts of their inheritance, right? So, what were they sent there to do? Well, it says that they were sent there to see, just kind of search it out, see what the conditions were like. See if it was fit for them to live there. Also, to see how they would be able to gain possession of the land. They say so right there. It says, and they said unto them, search the land, right? They're looking for a convenient place. One that could have, so that they could, make their country bigger, all right? The verse then says, who, when they came to Mount Ephraim. Well, Mount Ephraim was on the border, right? It says, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. More like, when they came near Micah's home, okay? I don't think it meant that they went into his home. I just think it means, they were in the neighborhood, right? Like a public house or something. I think this because of what we read in the next verse. Dan was an example of a whole tribe participating in idolatry. They had to have gone around, they had to, right? Because they were around the Philistines. Otherwise, they would have had to fight, all right? These are spies, remember. They wanted to see how easy it would be to take the land. All right, verse 3 now. When they were by the house of Micah, they knew the voice of the young man the Levite, and they turned in hither, and said unto him, Who brought thee hither, and what makest thou in this place, and what hast thou here? So when it says by the house, like I just said, I think this is just some kind of an inn, someplace close. Or it could mean that they were just, passing by, right? It says that they knew the voice of the young man, the Levite. This is speaking of the Levite that we discussed earlier. So we know they had been in his company before. They've spoken with him before, right? Because it says that they knew his voice. And Abernell says he probably was singing to the idols of Micah, or maybe he was, praying before these idols. The verse says, and they turned in thither. They went into Micah's house. Maybe into that apartment that the Levite was living in. The verse tells us, and said unto him, who brought thee hither? You see, they knew him. They knew that he was from Bethlehem. So they asked him, right? How'd you get here? Maybe meaning who sent him there, or who brought him there, right? The verse goes on to say, and what makest thou in this place? They know that he's a Levite. They know that he has no business at all being in a temple, especially one like this, right? So they're asking him about it. Why are you here? We know that it's because he wanted to support himself, So it seems that they know, right, that he had gone to work for Micah as a priest. And as they hear him, they go to see him, and they, of course, they ask him, because he's a Levite, what do you think you're doing? Right? This priest, he's broken so many of the Levitical laws. He's performed the services in a house, not a temple, right? In a house. And he's using idols. He's claiming that he spoke for God when he had not even prayed to God. So how can he claim to have a message? We see him use religious phrases, but he does not know God. He says phrases like, go in peace. Before the Lord is your way wherein ye go, which we'll be seeing later. So let's look at verse 4 and see what it states. And he said unto them, thus and thus dealeth Micah with me, and hath hired me, and I am his priest. I believe that this verse was shortened, right? Because I don't think we're reading the whole story here about how I think what we're reading here is just a shortened version of what we already read. How he'd come there, and how he came to Micah's door, and how Micah then asked him, if he would live there, and yada 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 yada, right? And then Micah invited him into his house, and that's where this verse says, and he hath hired me, right? Because remember, Micah pays him by the year 10 shekels of silver, a suit of clothing, meat and drink, everything. It was this way that he received his livelihood. And of course, Micah supported him. The verse says, and I am his priest. His job, right? His job was, of course, to offer sacrifices for the family, consult the oracle, if you will, all of that stuff. He tells these spies all of this, everything that Micah required of him. And I think that's what we're reading here. It's just a shortened version of that. So let's go move on. Verse 5. And they said unto him, ask counsel, we pray thee of God, that we may know whether our way which we go shall be prosperous. Now take notice of how they do not chastise him, do they? They're not chastising him because he assumed a priestly title. No. This was actually something that happened a lot, which just shows us how depraved these times were. They also do not chastise him for the idolatry, right? They even seem to encourage him. They even take the opportunity to have him seek God's counsel for them concerning this errand that they're on. He, of course, then leads them into the tabernacle, to the site of the ephod, the teraphim, and of course the images, right? They believe that they believe in these foretold futures. Now, you have to wonder if they meant the one true God when they say God here. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Or am I right? Who did they believe they were going to get an answer from? Was it God, or was it the God of Micah? Because according to the Targum, they did indeed mean the one true God. In fact, in the Targum, it's paraphrased this way: ask the word of the Lord. The verse says, that we may know whether our way which we go shall be prosperous or not. They wanted to know that they should, find a place, right? And that they should be able to get, possession of it. The fact that these men just automatically accept him as a priest makes me wonder, as we discussed this before, was this man actually a priest? I mean, they do ask him for guidance. They want him to pray to God for them. So, was he really a priest before coming here? Of course, we'll never know. But let us continue on. Verse 6. And the priest said unto them, go in peace, before the Lord is your way wherein ye go. We see the priest say, before the Lord is your way. Meaning that their design, what they were doing, was under God's eye. Under his direction, his protection, his care, right? Am I right? I think that he made this up because he could not have had an answer from God. The ephod or the teraphim. Not in any way, right? But because of this, we can tell that they had spread word that people could look for answers from this oracle. You see, we can guess that they used the ephod because it was usually the way that the Lord would speak to his high priest, through the Urim and the Thummim, okay? Now, let's look at verse 7. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people that were therein, how they dwelt careless, after the manner of the Zidonians, quiet and secure, and there was no magistrate in the land that might put them to shame in anything, and they were far from the Zidonians, and had no business with any man. We see a mention of a city here, a city called Laish, Laish. This is a city that was called Leshem in Joshua 19:47. Take a look with me. Joshua 19:47. Loading slow again today. And the coast of the children of Dan went out too little for them. Therefore the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem, and took it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and possessed it, and dwelt therein, and called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. This is just, we're reading here is a longer version of this, right? It was in the far northern part of the land. We see it renamed Dan later, right? The location actually gave us the phrase from Dan to Beersheba, right? When we see them like to mention, northern to southern limits of Israel. It's very secluded. It's a very rich land. What we read tells us that the people of Laish, they were living a very quiet life, okay? Very peaceful. Semi-luxurious, you could say. I mean, look, there was no magistrate, right? They have an easy living here. They did not even get to know them. They just watched them. They spied for information, and then they left them alone. All right. Verse 8 now. And they came unto their brethren to Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said unto them, what say ye? This was, of course, after, they had visited the city. They had told the ones, who had sent them from Zorah and Eshtaol about the city and about its inhabitants. The verse says, and their brethren said unto them, what say ye? They're asking, hey, what'd you find out? Tell us what you saw. And of course, they then gave them the full report, right? So, let's go to verse 9 now. And they said, arise, that we may go up against them. For we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And are ye still? Be not slothful to go and to enter to possess the land. What we're reading here is them saying, hey, prepare for war, right? They want to go now. Let's go take the city. It's easy, right? The verse says, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. Now, I read about a Catholic priest named, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I'm sorry, Adricomius. He's from the late 16th century, okay? And he said that this land would have been very fertile, very good pasture, right? And it would have been abounding with fruits of all different types. All right? This is also what Josephus said. The verse says, and are ye still? What they're doing here is they're asking him, how can you sit still? How can you not be stirred up? Let's go possess this land now. So they seem to not be excited, all right, and ready to take this land. Now Abernell, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm sorry, that the spies were worried that someone else is going to figure out that this land is good and easy to take, and that they're going to go and take it before they get a chance. The Danites get a chance to go. The verse says, "Be not slothful to go and to enter to possess the land." They're telling them that there was nothing more that they needed to do. Let's go. Let's take this land, right? And it would be only, if they were being slothful, that would keep them from taking it. So essentially, these 5 spies, they're encouraging them, hey, let's go take this land. They saw how these people were living, how comfortable they were, and how the land is very fertile. And they're encouraging their brethren, hey, let's go. Let's take this land. All right. Let's go look at verse 10 now. When ye go, ye shall come unto a people secure, and to a large land, for God hath given it into your hands, a place where there is no want of any kind, and of anything, that is in the earth. They say, God hath given it into your hands. They believe that they have God's promise, because why? Well, remember that Levite told them they did, right? When they visited him. And they saw how easy these people were. The verse says, a place where there is no want of anything that is in the earth, right? There was nothing in the land but wheat, barley, and figs. All the necessities that they needed, all the conveniences that they could ever want, all they could ever need. Large, fertile lands. They would want for nothing. The people they saw, they were living on Easy Street, if you will. They didn't expect any trouble to come out of them. So the spies assume it's just going to be an easy target. So let's look at verse 11 now, see what it says. And they went from thence of the families of the Danites out of Zorah and out of Eshtaol 600 men appointed with weapons of war. When it says of the family, it would be better if it was just said families, because there was more than one, right? Because you cannot get 600 men out of one family, unless it's a McCaskill. The verse says out of Zorah and out of Eshtaol. The 2 cities are listed here again, okay? It says that there were 600 men appointed with weapons of war. 600 men set out, armed for this place, on their way to Laish. And this is a small army. But let's remember, they believe that they will not come upon any opposition. So they think that this is all that they're going to need. Alright, verse 12. And they went up and pitched in Kirjath Jearim in Judah, wherefore they called that place Mahanadan unto this day. Behold, it is behind Kirjath Jearim. Kirith Jearim, and I'm sorry, I know I'm butchering that, is said to be about 16 miles from Zorah and Eshtaol, right? This was, of course, in their first day of marching. The verse says, wherefore they called the name of that place Mahanadan unto this day. Mahanadan literally means the camp of Dan, or if you prefer, Danites. All right, it was actually called this when you read the story of Samson. So it makes me believe, all right, that this took place before the story of Samson. All right, that makes sense, right? Because we're reading that it was still called this during the days of Samuel. Because remember, I believe that Samuel wrote this. I believe Samuel wrote the book of Judges. The verse says, behold, it is behind Kirjath Jearim. Behind means to the west of it. You'll know that if you were paying attention when we were doing Job. Even though it says that they pitched in that place, it just means near it. It doesn't mean actually there, it just means near it. It would have been more convenient for them to camp in the fields that were actually adjacent to it. So we know that this army had stopped there, and they were there to rest before they were going to go and take the city. Kirith Jearim literally translates to the city of the forests. This is probably why they stopped there, because they would not have been, out in the open. Alright, let's go to verse 13 now. And they passed thence unto Mount Ephraim, and came into the house of Micah. Alright, here we see Micah again. Now Micah's house was north from where they had been before, only about 8 miles. This is where they were headed. You see, we see here soon that the Danites actually seized the idols of Micah. But did they do this because they knew that they were false idols? No. No. Because they actually believed that they had power to give them the land that they wanted. We see the Levite of Micah, named Jonathan, and he sells out yet again. This tie to be the priest of the Danites. This time, I should say. He's leaving to be the priest of the Danites. We see that it does not bother them for him to defect so easily. They seem to believe in him. They believe in his power. They believe in him as a priest, as a Levite. Alright, verse 14 now. Then answered the 5 men that went to spy out to the country of Laish, and said unto their brethren, do ye know that there is in these houses an ephod, and teraphim, and a graven image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what ye have to do. This is speaking of these 5 men here. These, remember, they were spies. Alright? And we see here that they had been sent to Laish. Right? We know this. This shows us that they actually had some knowledge that the place actually existed, and that Dan had sent these men there. And when they passed this way, when they passed through here, they remembered what they had seen in Micah's house. So they're telling the other men. It says, and said unto their brethren, do ye know that there is in those houses? Meaning specifically, they must have pointed at that village as it came into view. The verse says, an ephod, and teraphim, and a graven image, and a molten image. We talked about all of this last week, didn't we? Here we see these spies telling these other men about it, telling them that they saw these things there. Not only that they saw them, but that they consulted with them. Right? The verse says, now therefore consider. They're saying what you have to do. I think they're asking them, consider if they should go and consult them again, or should they take them for their own, so that they can consult them whenever they feel like it. And they would be a token and a pledge, right? Kind of like a good luck charm. Remember, last time these 5 spies were there, They went to that priest seeking guidance. We saw that they were not thankful for Micah's hospitality. If anything, though, these men, they should be there casting these things out and destroying them, because these are false idols. But I want you to pay attention to what they do as we go on. I think, just pay attention. Verse 15 now. And they turned thitherward, and came to the house of the young man the Levite, even unto the house of Micah, and saluted him. This shows us that the house was, it was out of their way. Notice, they had to turn to go to that house, right? The verse says, and came to the house of the young man the Levite, even unto the house of Micah. Remember, his house was only an apartment. It was probably, right beside the house that had the images and the oracle. And it was here that these men went. They did not go to Micah's house. No, they went to the Levite. The verse says, and saluted him. So they're asking him, how are you doing? They're being very kind. They're ingratiating themselves to him. I think I mentioned this last week, but from what we read, to me, it sounds like Micah's house was several houses that were connected together. And of course, we see these men, they greet the Levite like, hey, nothing's going on. We're just here to see you, but how you doing, That type of normal conversation. Verse 16. And the 600 men appointed with their weapons of war, which were the children of Dan, stood by the entering of the gate. So this is saying that these men, they were armed, okay? They were armed and they were wearing their armor and they're marching. The verse says, which were of the children of Dan. Remember, no one else was on this expedition. Only the men from Danite. Only these Danites. The verse says, stood by the entering of the gate. Now this is not talking about Micah's house. This is the gates of the city that his house is in. They stood there while these 5 men visited this Levite. Alright. Verse 17. And the 5 men went to spy out the land, went up. The 5 men that went to spy out the land went up, and came in thither, and took the graven image, and the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image, and the priest stood in the entering of the gate with the 600 men that were appointed with weapons of war. So this tells us what? Well, it says they came to Micah's house. They saluted the priest, right? They greeted him. They gave him his proper respect, right? We see that they must have told him about their brethren, who, the ones that were out there waiting. He most likely knew they would be expecting to see them, right? And he wanted to see them as well. So he went out. He went out there to pay them respect. I like to imagine that they took him there before we see them go inside, right? As the verse says, and took the graven image, the ephod, the teraphim, the molten image. I like to think that they took him there before they went in, before they grabbed him, before they brought them out, right? This shows us that there were, in fact, 2 images, right? The graven and the molten, because why else do we see only the graven image mentioned? They were distinguished, molten and graven. Not a molten graven, no. This verse makes it plain. They took the graven image, the ephod, and the teraphim. The verse goes on to say, and the priest stood in the entering of the gate with the 600 men that were appointed with the weapons of war. They had him there speaking, right? He's speaking to them. They did this while the 5 men were stealing these things. We then read, and I want you to make no mistake, this is considered by force. They knew that the priest could not put up a fight. There are 600 men, right? So they kept him there, talking to him while they waited on these other 5 men to come back. Watch what we read here in a little bit. It becomes obvious that this young Levite only wanted to be a priest because of money. It says of him, priest's heart was glad. to go with these Danites. Why? Why? Because it was in his best interest. That's why. When you're a minister or any sort of church leader, okay, your number one motivator should only be to serve God and his people. All right? Not some dishonest gains. All right? The New Testament makes it perfectly clear. I want you to read with me a few verses here, because this makes me angry. So read with me. 1 Timothy 3:8. Likewise must the deacons be grave, not double-tongued, not given too much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre. All right? Now let's look at Titus. Titus, chapter 1, verse 7. For a bishop must be blameless, as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre. You notice that? That's constantly there. All right, 1 Peter 5:2. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but for of a ready mind. Do we get this? A minister who's all about money is not a minister of God. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Verse 18. And these went into Micah's house and fetched the carved image, the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. Then said the priest unto them, What do ye? They went in, all right, they went into where the gods were. Now notice, this is not the 600 men. They're out there with the Levite. No, these are them 5 men, these spies. They went into the chapel, the verse says, and fetched the carved image, the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. They stole them. They took them away. They took them to the gate with them, where that army was waiting. What did the Levite say when he sees them? Then it says, Then said the priest to them, What do ye? He's asking them, Why have you done this? You know, these things were in his care. He was supposed to protect them. He was supposed to take care of them. It was his job. It was his mind, right? In his mind and theirs, these things were sacred. They were meant for devotion. So they were committing sacrilege. His protests, though, are pointless, because they don't care. They don't listen to what he's saying. Remember, Micah had been friendly with these men. They stole from him. What they're doing here is a horrible action. They should not be doing this. Because like I said, Micah was friendly with them. He was nice to them. Alright, verse 19. And they said unto him, Hold thy peace. Lay thine hand upon thy mouth, and go with us. Be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man, or that thou be a priest unto a tribe and a family in Israel? They tell him to shut up. They're telling him, be quiet. Right? The verse says, Lie thy hand upon thy mouth. We discussed this before, but it's a way of keeping quiet. I don't know why I mentioned this, but it's just a bit of history. The Egyptians actually had a god of everything. You know, a god of the sun, the moon, the rain, you know, everything. One of them was the god of silence. His name, Harpocrates. He was always pictured with his forefinger pressed against his lips. Just like that. Anyway, the verse goes on. And be to us a father and a priest. They tell him to be their priest, to teach them, perform the acts of devotion for them. Let them ask his counsel. Funny though, this shows us that during this time, it was common to call a priest father. Anyway, the verse goes on. Is it better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man, or that thou be a priest unto a tribe and a family in Israel? They seem to feel that there is more honor for him. Not to mention the advantages that he would be in, or I should say that he would have, being a priest over a body of people. They probably let him think about this for a little while, because remember, this priest, he wanted money, he wanted fame. They're offering him the opportunity that he probably wanted, the opportunity to minister to a whole community. Where he was at that time, he was only ministering to one man. And if he goes with them, there's at least 600. They each would have had their own families, right? So let's move on. 20. Verse 20. And the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image, and went in the midst of the people. So he was happy. He was happy with this opportunity that they're giving him. He's covetous. He's ambitious. Remember, we know that he had a rambling and an unsettled mind. We talked about this before. What this is, it suits him just fine. It says that he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image. No doubt, he took that molten image as well. He took these out of the hands of the 5 men, the ones that had been holding them, and he agreed to do what they wanted. We see right here where it says, and he went into the midst of the people. He went into the midst, meaning he was in the middle of them. I think maybe he was worried, right? Thinking maybe Micah's going to come after him. Or that the neighbor or a servant might, run and tell Micah what's going on. I also saw where some believe that he did this because the priests who would have bore the ark would have been in this position when they journeyed. He's just so excited. He's a priest of this large community now. He did not care that these items that he would be using were stolen. Not only that, they were stolen from Micah, the man who'd been treating him so well, a man who befriended him. And not only treated him well, treated him like one of his sons, remember? So let's go on, verse 21. So they turned and departed, and put their little ones and the cattle and the carriage before them. What do we see here? Well, it says that they turned from the gate of the city, and they started on their march towards Laish. The verse tells us that they put the little ones and the cattle and the carriage before them. Now, I believe that this would have, included their wives and their, because I bet you they took their wives with them. Even if they were not mentioned. Just because the wives are not mentioned, that doesn't mean anything. So, what do we have? Their wives, their children, their flocks, their herds, right? All of this was brought from Zorah to Eshtaol. This shows us that they were never intending to turn back. They believed that there was nothing that would stop them from taking this land. Look where it says carriage. The Targum doesn't say that. The Targum says their wealth and their substance. So they took whatever it was that they were able to take. They took their silver, their gold, all these things that were valuable and glorious in their sight anyway. They put all of these things before them. Why? Because their backs were towards the gate. They wanted to keep these things safe from Micah and his neighbors. They did not want him to overtake them if he decided to attack. Alright, verse 22. And when they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men that were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. They made it a good ways before Micah found out. It must have taken a while for Micah to find out, that his idols were stolen and the priest was gone. And then he had to gather everyone together, go, and chase after the ones that had done him wrong. The verse says, the men that were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together. So Micah had to have put out the word, right? He called for them to come to him so that he could tell them what happened. Remember, not only were they his neighbors, they were also worshiping these idols with him. Probably become addicted to it. So of course, they're pursuing. The verse says, and overtook the children of Dan. So the Danites were moving slower because they had their wives, they had their children, they had all their gold, their precious things, all this heavy stuff. And even though the verse does not give them a number, the people with Micah had to have been less, right? I bet Micah didn't have anywhere near the 600. So they could move faster than the Danites did. All right, verse 23. And they cried unto the children of Dan, and they turned their faces and said unto Micah, What aileth thee that thou comest with such a company? Okay, this is strange, but let's look at it. What we're reading here is that when the Danites saw these men coming towards them, when they were close enough to be heard, they called out to Micah. They wanted, and Micah probably wanted them to stop, right? The verse says, and they turned their faces. So the Danites turned around to look at them, stopped, right? Then, of course, would have been the men in the back, right? The verse says, and said unto Micah. So this shows us that Micah was at the front of this march, right? They say to him, What aileth thee that thou comest with such a company? This shows us that they could tell that he was ready to attack, right? So they must have looked hostile in some way. So they, of course, ask him, hey, why? They ask him, what have we done to you to provoke you to such actions, if you will? Verse 24, we get an answer. And he said, Ye have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and ye are gone away. And what have I more? And what is this that you say, What aileth thee? He's accusing him. He's accusing them of what? Taking away my gods. Meaning these false images, these false idols, these little statues or whatever, that he would have worshipped. And yes, they had taken them. But this is a poor argument, right? It's in favor of his little deity. And this also shows us that he knew what he was making, because he calls them gods. The verse says, and the priest came, and ye are gone away. Or I should say, and the priest and ye are gone away. Not only had they taken away his gods, but they took the priest. The priest who did all of the sacrificing for him, all of the assisting in the actions of devotion. The verse says, and what have I more? Do you realize what he's saying there? He's saying that everything that he had, even his wife, his children, none of them compared to these things. He didn't value anything else in his life as much as he did these things. They were where he found comfort, where he found his pleasure. And now that he did not have them, he's heartbroken. The verse goes on to say, and what is this that ye say unto me, what aileth thee? He's asking how they can even ask such a thing. How can you say you did not injure me? Like I have no reason to complain. He feels that these things that they took were more important than anything else in his life. Think about how sad this must have been for him. He had befriended these people. He took them in, allowed them to stay in his home, and they stole from him. They stole these things that he loved. These things that meant the world to him. And not only that, they had taken away his priest as well. He was very heartbroken. Verse 25. And the children of Dan said unto him, let not thy voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows run upon thee, and thou lose thy life with the lives of thy household. They're telling Micah, stop your complaining. Don't complain to us. Don't act like we did anything wrong. Then they say, lest angry fellows run upon thee. These men would be angry because they were blamed for stealing. That they would fall on him with swords. The verse says, and thou lose thy life. But not only his life, but his family's life. Him, his family, his servants, all those who rented homes from him, his neighbors, all of them, all of these things should have been precious to him. More precious than these false gods, these little statues, right? They are essentially bullying him. Yes, I called them bullies. Just because that you're stronger than someone does not give you permission to take something from them. They tell him if he continues to complain, that they'll kill his family. If he tried to take them back, he will die. They leave Micah with no alternative. Let us have these things or die. Sad, sad, sad. Alright, verse 26. And the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back into his house. So the Danites just left. They saw no reason to stand there talking to him. They felt no reason to fear him. The verse then says, and when Micah saw they were too strong for him, he saw how many they were, right? And how they're not afraid of him. He saw that they were a large army, and he knew that it was pointless. It's pointless for him to even try. They would destroy him and his neighbors. So the verse says he turned and went away, went into his own home. Maybe he returned to the true worship of God. If so, then hey, great. Them taking it was a good thing. But at least Micah and his men went home and they were alive. Sure, they were disappointed, but they were alive. Now, as we move forward, I want you to notice what the Danites do. Instead of destroying the cities that were inside of their own inheritance, they conquer cities like Laish, which was not even part of their inheritance. And then what do they do then? God ordered the Israelites to destroy the idols of these pagans. But instead, the Danites, they set up their own idols. They seem to be unaware that worshiping these idols is not the same thing as worshiping God. Alright, verse 27. And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priest which he had, and came into Laish unto a people that were at quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burnt the city with fire. Look where it says the things. We know what these things are. These are the ephod, the teraphim, and of course the two images. It tells us that the Danites took them, and better yet, they kept them. And they went on their merry way. The verse says, and the priest which he had. Well, yeah, we did not hear where he turned back with Micah, did we? He went on his own free will. The verse says, and came into Laish, unto the people that were quiet and secure. It's sad. Remember, these people, they never expected an attack. And because of this, they did not have any guards. They didn't have any sentinels who could warn them. They seemed so peaceful that they probably left the gates of the city wide open. The verse goes on to say, and they smote them with the edge of the sword. They just walked into the city, attacked these people without any warning. They cut them all to pieces. The verse goes on to say, and burnt the city with fire. Now, this could mean that they started little fires here and there in a way to, scare the people. Or maybe they even set some of the businesses or something like that on fire. Again, just to frighten the people. Because remember, when they do this, the people they'll get all confused and they'll run around, and it makes them easier to kill. We discussed this before. The reason I say this, because like I said, remember, they intended to live there. Why would they set the whole city on fire? I mean, sure, they did rebuild it, and they renamed it. But why would you burn the whole thing? I just want to say, this is cruel. It's brutal to just, kill these people who were peaceful. It's violent. It's ruthless. All right, let's move on. Verse 28. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon, and they had no business with any man. And it was in the valley that lieth by Beth Rehob, and they built a city and dwelt therein. This post seems to suggest that this city was part of Zidon, and it was under their protection. And since it was so far from them, right? And since the Danites came there with no warning, they had no time to send for help. They had no one to help them, no one to save them from this enemy. The verse then goes on to say, and they had no business with any man. This tells me that no one had ever been able to warn them if they had known about it. And the Zidonians, they had no reason to come and check on them. They had no alliances at all. Then the verse says, and it was in the valley that lieth by Beth Rehob. I think I mentioned this earlier, but the city was on the northern border of Canaan. You would pass through it on your way to Hamath, which is in Syria. And we read here that it says, and they built a city to dwell there. And as I told you, I do not think this means that they completely rebuilt it. I think they just enlarged it, made it, more convenient for them to live there. These poor people, they lived so far away from everybody. They lived in peace, and yet they had no one to help them. And now they're all dead because of the cruelty of these Danites. All right, verse 29 now. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at the first. So we see that they called the city, name of the city, Dan, right? Because the city was at the most northern part of Canaan. We see where the phrase from Dan to Beersheba came from. I mentioned that earlier, meaning from the far north to the far south. Not much to explain here with this verse. It's just telling us that they named the city Dan, and it was built on top of this old city Laish, and it was renamed Dan because the tribal name of the ancestor, yada yada yada. Notice in the next two verses how we read this false worship continues with Dan throughout the period of the Judges, but true worship was still available in Shiloh. You can read about that if you want in Deuteronomy chapter 12. I think it's the whole chapter, verses 1 to 32. It's on you if you want to go read that. Alright, verse 30 now. And the children of Dan set up their graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests in the tribe of Dan unto the day of the captivity of the land. This is where we see the name of the priest. I mentioned this earlier. This is where we see it. This is where we see his name is Jonathan. He was a descendant of Gershom, who was the son of Moses. All right. Manasseh is a later reading. Okay. All they did was add the letter N. All right, into the text about the M in Moses. I think that they did this as a way of protecting Moses' name. Because if you look at Manasseh and, you don't want to attach Moses to apostasy. We see that this idolatry here continues until the captivity. We know that this is the most likely one of two things, okay? First, the captivity of Israel by Syria. This would have happened in 722 BC, which we can read about in 2 Kings. Second Kings chapter 15 verse 29. It says, in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel Beth I'm sorry, I'm not saying that word. And Genoa and Kadesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria. Okay? You can also read about it more in chapter 17, verses 1 to 6. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hosea, the son of Elah, the reign of Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of God, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hosea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hosea, and he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, and he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and called Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. Or maybe the Philistines, right? The Philistine captivity of the ark from Shiloh, which is in Samuel 4:11. 1 Samuel, I'm sorry. And the ark of God was taken, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. You know, I mean, sure, these images are mentioned. They might not be a false god, right? But remember, God had forbidden things like this. Jonathan, he was priest, all right? He's the priest of this idolatrous group of vicious men. We can gather that his sons were the priests of these people for a very, very, very long time. All right, so now here we are, the last verse of the chapter, right? Verse 31. So let's go ahead and read. And they set them up Micah's graven image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Now remember, Shiloh was a very important city for Israel. We know that the tabernacle was there. This is also where they divided up the inheritance, remember? Most importantly, at this time, the ark is still there. It is believed that this graven image to the Danites was the visible sign of God. But now remember, God is a spirit, and the tabernacle is in Shiloh. And it has been since Joshua, right, until Levi. They have mixed idolatry with the worship of God in their attempts, right? But God does not approve of this. We're given directions on how to worship in the Bible, and it is clear we do not mix paganism with God, or if you prefer, heathen worship in our worship. So, yeah. Thank you for joining me here. As I say each and every week, it's a pleasure. And I'm sorry about the mix-up at the beginning where I accidentally said chapter 17 instead of 18. My mind was in another place. I had a scare the other day, and I'm doing good. Nothing to worry about. Just keep me in your prayers, you know. And I love each and every one of you. And if you're seeing this before it gets too late, I had a bunch of bread donated to the ministry from Panera. So if it's something you're interested in and you would like to get some, get a hold of me before it's all gone. Might be continuing to do this, so follow the page on Facebook and you'll know about it. Follow me on Facebook and you'll know about it. So thank you all again. May God continue to bless you and keep you, and I'll see you all here next week for an all-new Sermons in the Park. And we'll be going to chapter 19, right? So thank you. God bless you.